Story recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain an action, fantasy, and horror film called Warlock the Armageddon. Spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. For years, druids have always used their powers to protect the earth from evil. Once every millennium, during an eclipse, druids would summon their runestones magic to prevent the birth of Satan's son. In the past, several druids performed a ritual and used their runestones on a woman bearing Satan's child. They were supposed to create light to defeat darkness, only to be attacked by Christians, who thought they served Satan. As everything descended into chaos, the druids still tried protecting the 6 stones. Meanwhile, the woman on the stone slab was killed by a knight, and the Christians managed to get 2 runestones. When the Christians left, one druid checked on his injured elder and said he saved 2 of the stones. The Christians took the birthstone that the woman was wearing, so the old man said the birth of Satan's son was still to come. In the present, Kenny tries catching up to his girlfriend, Samantha, after her theater club practice. Outside, Samantha gets in the car with her father, Reverend Ted Ellison. He asks Samantha's friend, Andy, if he's taking Samantha to the movies that weekend, and the boy says he'd like to. When Kenny finally comes out, Ted notices his daughter smile before driving away. Disappointed, Kenny starts walking home, but Andy's group stops him. Andy warns him to stay away from Samantha, unaware that Kenny's father, Will Travis, is watching them from a distance. Being a druid, Will easily turns on the sprinklers using his powers. Then, once Andy and his friends flee, he smiles and leaves too. But on his way home, Will witnesses lightning strike a tree trunk. Unfortunately, from the sawdust and ashes, Will finds the symbol of the birth of Satan's son. At home, a beautiful woman named Amanda prepares for her date. She dresses up and wears one of the runestones as a necklace, which is a family heirloom. After that, Amanda looks out the window and sees the lunar eclipse. Seconds later, Amanda feels tremendous pain and thrashes around, lying on the table and unable to do anything as her stomach rapidly grows. It isn't long before Amanda gives birth to Satan's son, the Warlock, who is already a grown man. Frightened, Amanda crawls to the bathroom as the Warlock slowly approaches her, locking herself there and trying to pull herself together. However, the Warlock floats and talks to Amanda through the window above the door, screaming and causing the glass to break when the woman refuses to let him in. Using Amanda's lifeless body, the Warlock communicates with his father. He's tasked to retrieve the other 5 stones, learning he only has 6 days to complete the mission. Satan reveals that when the sun emerges from the darkness, the Warlock's time will pass. Afterward, the Warlock grabs Amanda's stone. When Amanda's stomach burns, the Warlock peels the skin from it and uses it as a map to find the runestones. He also takes the clothes of Amanda's date, who finally arrives. Wasting no time, the Warlock takes a cab to head to Chicago. The next day, Will goes to a cafe and greets his friends, Ethan and Franks, scattering sawdust on the table that forms the symbol of the birth of Satan's son. As it turns out, they're also druids, who can't believe that Satan's spawn has arrived. Using an Asgardian compass to confirm the Warlock's arrival, Frank tells Will they should talk to another druid, Ted. Sadly, Will reminds him the Reverend's not one of them anymore. He then gives the compass to Ethan because the man wants to slow down the son of Satan and says it will reveal a path to the Warlock, adding that they have something to do. After swimming in the river, Kenny talks to Samantha about their plan to go to Berkeley. Samantha says she's not sure about it anymore, confessing she's not ready to leave Logan Valley. She also admits she needs more time, but Kenny points out he's sick of that place and hearing people talk about his father. To make things worse, all Will tells Kenny is that people live in fear of what they don't understand, which confuses him. Kenny makes it clear he's leaving with or without Samantha, breaking the girl's heart. As they talk, Will and Franks unexpectedly arrive. Scared, Samantha runs, and that's when Will shoots and kills his son. The old men bring Kenny's body to Will's bookstore where they treat the boy's wounds. Kenny soon comes back to life, moving away from Will and Franks and asking his father why he killed him. In Chicago, the Warlock watches a fashion show and sees a model wearing one of the runestones. He follows the model backstage where he sees her give the stone to a designer, Paula. The Warlock asserts that Paula will hand him the runestone freely and willingly because those are the rules, revealing he's a Warlock, but Paula doesn't believe him. To prove he's telling the truth, the Warlock asks Paula to follow him to the rooftop. There, the Warlock takes Paula's hand and flies, prompting Paula to give him the stone. Sad to say, the Warlock lets Paula fall once he has what he wants, and the woman lands on the stage and dies, leaving everyone terrified. Concurrently, Kenny learns that Satan is trapped in hell, and his son, the Warlock, will get the chance to release him during the days in between the lunar and solar eclipse. The Warlock has 6 days to complete this mission, which will bring about the end of the world. Will explains that they're druids who are blessed by God with certain gifts to stop Armageddon. At that moment, Kenny sees a book containing an illustration of the runestones. According to Will, the stones have the power to free the devil or to keep him trapped where he belongs. Still confused, Kenny asks his father why he had to shoot him, but Will just goes outside. As Frank and Kenny follow Will, they are shocked to see dead birds on the ground. Ted is there with the townsfolk, telling Will the people are worried he has something to do with that. Ted walks toward Will and states the birds probably died because of an insecticide or pollution, but the people believe that Will and his group are responsible for what happened. Frustrated, Ted tells the townsfolk there's no one to blame for what happened to the birds and asks them to go home. Once the people are gone, Kenny sees Samantha arrive while Will and Frank talks to Ted about the Warlock and the stones. To prove that the Warlock is coming, Will reminds Ted of how the birds will be severed from the sky because of Satan's son. Sure enough, Ted sees the icon of their destruction on one of the dead birds, but he still refuses to believe Will and leaves with his daughter. Meanwhile, the Warlock stops at a small gas station, where the attendant refills the cab's tank. Back at Will's house, Frank shows the man a scroll containing a spell that'll hurt the Warlock. Frank says a blue wooden pin dipped in the ink of mandrake juice during the space of the black life can harm the Warlock, and then he casts the spell. At the gas station, the attendant notices that the cab driver is dead and quickly informs the Warlock. However, the Warlock ignores him and nonchalantly asks if his car is fast. It isn't long before the Warlock starts bleeding because of Frank's spell, and the more Frank stabs the leaf, the more Satan's son gets hurt. The attendant can only desperately try to help the Warlock as he bleeds profusely, unaware that a druid is causing the stranger's pain. But at the same time, Will points out to Frank that Kenny is the only one who can stop the Warlock. When Frank stops stabbing the leaf, the Warlock finally manages to relax. The attendant wants to take him to the hospital, but the Warlock suddenly attacks him and drinks his blood, leaving him dead. That night, Will takes Kenny into the woods and reveals that the timing of his birth is a sign that he's a druid warrior. Will also confesses that he killed Kenny so he could rise from his own death as a warrior. He tells his son that the Warlock will come for the stones, and they have to stand and fight. Understandably, Kenny doesn't know how to take everything in, but Will wants him to know that they're the Earth's guardians. Then, Will instructs Kenny to stay there and listen to the trees, informing him they'll start training in the morning. At home, Will is visited and confronted by Ted, who wants him to keep Kenny away from Samantha. Will says 2 warriors need to defeat the Warlock, but Ted is having none of it. Before leaving, Ted warns Will he'll let the townsfolk deal with him if Kenny doesn't leave his daughter alone. The next day, the Warlock takes the gas station attendant's car to travel. In Logan Valley, Franks and Will help Kenny understand and use his powers. Will throws a ball into the field and orders Kenny to sense it with his eyes closed, and the boy manages to make it float. Despite that, Kenny struggles to control his powers and breaks their truck's window with the ball. In the evening, the Warlock arrives at a circus and intends to buy the next runestone from the ringmaster. One of the performers, Augusto, tells the owner not to sell the stone, saying the Warlock will cause Armageddon. Annoyed, the Warlock picks him up and places him inside an Iron Maiden, killing him. Frightened, the ringmaster flees to a room of mirrors, where the Warlock creates an illusion. The Warlock places a second runestone inside the ringmaster's pocket and asks him to identify the real one, saying he'll let the man live if he guesses correctly. The ringmaster confidently tosses to the Warlock the stone he believes to be fake, only to make a mistake and get trapped in a room of nightmares. Later that night, Kenny heads to the river and finds a distraught Samantha, who says she's been having dreams about symbols, great blackness, and daggers. Samantha begs Kenny to explain to her what's happening, so Kenny reveals that his father shot him and brought him back to life to save the world from the forces of evil. Then they run to the bridge when it rains and see they're covered in blood. Samantha mentions Chokmah and says the water shall turn red as death, clueless about how she knows that. Overwhelmed, Samantha suddenly runs away, leaving Kenny worried. In the morning, Will asks Kenny to fire up the grill. The boy manages to do it, but he also sets the tree on fire. Then, that night, Will and Franks are about to show Kenny the dagger that can stop the Warlock when they realize that Ethan took it. Without the weapon, Will says they should make sure the Warlock doesn't open the gateway and worry about how to kill him later. Meanwhile, Ethan tracks the Warlock to Sinclair Enterprises and gets in the elevator with him. Ethan only realizes he's already with the Warlock when his compass shakes, so he takes the dagger and attempts to stab him. Sadly, Ethan is no match for the Warlock, who mercilessly kills and dismembers him before getting out of the elevator. Afterward, the Warlock heads to the office of Nathan Sinclair. The Warlock demands to have the stone that's enclosed in a glass container, but Nathan only points a gun at him. Ignoring that, the Warlock entices Nathan and shows him the other runestones, saying he's a collector. Curious, Nathan takes the stone from the case and places it on the glass where the Warlock puts the other runestones. Nathan wants to buy all the stones, but the Warlock says they're not for sale and asks for the one he has in exchange for the finest piece of art his collection has ever seen. Once Nathan hands him the stone, the Warlock deforms the man's body using magic and turns him into a small sculpture. At Will's house, Samantha sees a photo album and learns that Will was her father's friend. Will then reveals that their friendship ended when his wife and Samantha's mother died while giving birth. Will refuses to say more and starts to leave, but Samantha demands to know who she is and unwittingly closes the door using her powers. Remaining calm, Will asks the girl to open the door, and this time Samantha concentrates on unlocking the door with her mind. In the woods, Kenny finally controls his powers as he removes some parts from his motorcycle. At home, Ted is confronted by his daughter. Samantha asks why he didn't tell her the truth, so Ted confesses he just wants them to live a normal life. Knowing she's a warrior like Kenny and needs to be reborn, Samantha stabs and kills herself. Of course, Will brings her back to life in the bookstore, where Ted apologizes to her. Wasting no time, Will takes out the two remaining stones. One of them is the stone of their people, and the other binds the rest of the runestones together. Will says the second stone can disrupt the ritual when exposed to bright light, which can be used during the eclipse. Moments later, Kenny and Samantha are confronted by Andy in the woods. Andy wants to take Samantha home, but Samantha makes his chest hurt using her powers and says everything will be destroyed the next day, sending him running away. Once Andy is gone, Kenny and Samantha kiss, making love under the trees before going to battle. Then Kenny gives one of the stones to Samantha and asks her to keep it safe. Concurrently, the Warlock finally reaches Logan Valley and finds a woman in town, saying she could be the one to announce his arrival. The following day, Will and Ted find the townsfolk by the church. As it turns out, they're looking at the body of the woman the Warlock talked to, who's been killed and crucified upside down. Again, the people accuse Will of being Satan's follower and attempt to grab him, but Kenny uses his powers to control a ball and distract them. In the bookstore, the Warlock tortures Franks and chops off his arms after getting the fifth stone from him. Without warning, an axe suddenly hits Franks. The Warlock turns around and sees Kenny, thinking he missed. Kenny says he didn't miss and only wants to end Frank's suffering, but the Warlock doesn't give him a chance to do anything else and causes an explosion, throwing Kenny out of the bookstore. Unfortunately, Kenny gets impaled on a broken metal bar, retaliating by setting the Warlock on fire. However, that doesn't harm the Warlock, who gets mad and tries to run Kenny over with a car. Luckily, Kenny manages to use his powers and stop the vehicle with a manhole cover. Will and Ted also arrive with guns, walking toward the Warlock and repeatedly shooting him. Despite being wounded and crashing into a window, the Warlock emerges from the roof and walks in the air, shooting Will and Ted with just his fingers. Afterward, the Warlock demands the stone from Kenny, unaware that Will and Ted are still alive. At that moment, Samantha arrives on a motorcycle and shows the Warlock the last stone, daring him to get it from her before leaving. The Warlock immediately follows Samantha, so Will heals Kenny with a potion. Eventually, the Warlock catches up to Samantha in the woods. There, Samantha impales the Warlock with a branch, but Satan's son easily recovers. The Warlock then tries to kill Samantha with a huge rock, which the girl blows up. Infuriated, the Warlock sends Samantha flying several feet away, covering her mouth and tying her to Andy's truck. Then, the Warlock grabs the stone from Samantha and prepares to open the gateway to hell just as the eclipse starts. The Warlock uses the runestones to welcome his father, but Kenny arrives and hits him with lightning. Sad to say, the Warlock restrains him to a tree with vines. Again, the Warlock tries to open the gateway, allowing Satan to rise. With their time running out, Kenny asks Samantha to help him turn on the truck's lights and hit the stones, which they successfully do. Kenny and Samantha manage to stop the Warlock from releasing Satan, bringing back light to the world. But the Warlock is still alive and bashes Kenny's head against the tree, wanting to stab him with the dagger he got from Ethan that's been tampered with metal from the Holy Grail. Although he's weak, Kenny headbutts the Warlock and causes him to drop the dagger. Then, Kenny uses his powers to stab the Warlock, who attempts to stab him too, so Samantha distracts Satan's son. Finally, Kenny stabs the Warlock and it isn't long before the devil's spawn perishes. A few minutes later, Kenny and Samantha free themselves and hug each other, witnessing the ground absorb the Warlock's black blood. Samantha gets the stones before leaving, but the Warlock's skeleton suddenly grabs the birthstone from her and retreats into hell. Supporting each other, Kenny and Samantha soon walk away, thinking that they're safe for now.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.